Welcome back to another video. I watched a ton of videos about Xbox and Forza Horizon 5 and the launching of that game on PlayStation 5. There's the base edition, there's the Ultimate Edition, there's a paid for early access edition, and every single one of those editions is leading the way across multiple countries, regions on PlayStation. So it's beating out big games that are coming, like Assassin's Creed, like 2K. It's just the number one pre ordered game. Also, the number one pre ordered version of Forza Horizon 5 is the early access version. So essentially, that signals to Microsoft that a 4-year-old game that's essentially run its course on the Xbox has done very well, gotten great scores, gotten great user engagement. They've launched a ton of DLC. Tons of people played this game on the Xbox, myself included. I really enjoyed the game. It's one of the best Xbox games, I think, period. It almost feels like the car is a third person character and you explore the world as opposed to just driving through the world. That's how good the world is and how interactive it is. But this signals to Microsoft a few things. One, people are paying to play a game early that's 4 years old, that's run its course on Xbox, made all the money they possibly can, and now it's making even more money and beating out brand new games. A 4-year-old port of a game is beating out huge AAA games pre-ordered and releasing on the PlayStation 5. So ultimately, what that says to me is they're going to make a ton of money off of their old games. When those games run their course and there's nothing left to squeeze out of them, you can either leave them in that ecosystem, right? If people were engaging with that ecosystem and purchasing hardware to engage with that ecosystem, but they're not, or you can remonetize them in a way that nobody, I think, thought possible. I mean, Forza Horizon 5 is going to make more money than huge AAA games coming out, releasing on PlayStation 5, based on PlayStation users pre-ordering the game and paying for early access. So where does that leave Halo? Where does that leave Forza? Where does that leave Perfect Dark? Where does that leave everything Microsoft and Xbox does from a first-party standpoint? Clearly, if a 4-year-old game ported to the PlayStation is doing this well, why in the world would Microsoft and Xbox wait to release the next first-party big Forza game, or the next Fable game, or the next Perfect Dark game, or Elder Scrolls 6? The answer to that question is they wouldn't. They would release all of this stuff at once and make tons and tons of money, which they are. Think about something like the Uncharted collection. That is literally languishing in the PlayStation ecosystem. If Sony decided to release that collection, Uncharted 1, 2, and 3, on the Xbox, would that be the same? Would they make the same amount of money? People are arguing they should do that with older games, but there's a key difference here. Brand. The Xbox hardware brand, and I don't know any other way to look at it, but it is just flatlined. I mean, Kevin Bacon couldn't bring this back to life. That's an 80s movie reference. So it definitely hurts the brand, but I think Xbox as a brand was damaged long before they went third party. Microsoft just didn't do the work needed to create an ecosystem and to create content for it that was stellar. So at this point, the only logical conclusion for them is to do what they're doing, but the Xbox hardware is taking a severe hit. And if you look at the UK, I think like last quarter in the UK, there's a story where I think they sold like, it's extremely low. It's shocking when you see the number. I don't know what the number is, so I don't want to say it. But if different regions aren't even selling Xboxes anymore, and in big regions you're selling so minuscule amounts of consoles, why would you invest in hardware that no one's buying? So the only thing I can think of is maybe the people who are invested in Game Pass on console, you need to give them another piece of hardware to keep them reinvested. I don't know. I don't think those 28 to 32 million Xboxes, I don't know what the number is. Nobody does. Let's just go with 28. I don't think those 28 million Xbox Game Pass ecosystem subscribers that have to buy consoles to stay connected because they're console gamers, I don't think they're going to go anywhere else. But perpetually, as things increase, as costs increase, and you're making hardware for a very limited amount of people, at what point does Microsoft say, let's put all their games on PC to give them access to it, or let's say that they can tether their phone to their television, sign into the Xbox app, and they have all of their games. So preservation isn't a concern, but the console is gone. That's a very real possibility. So it's increasingly difficult for me to say, I think I'll purchase this game on the Xbox because I don't know if I'm going to have access to it in the future. Now you might say, well, 10 years from now, who cares? That's a good point. Right now, I don't think Xbox as a hardware brand is growing at all. In fact, I think having Xboxes on the shelf is continually damaging the brand because it's just not selling. You keep releasing this stuff and it sits there. You see it every week. I mean, there's different regions. I think PlayStation just sold like 1,000 in Japan or 100,000. 100,000 in Japan based off Monster Hunter Wilds releasing. So clearly there's an audience, and clearly they've chosen the piece of hardware that they want to engage when it comes to gaming on, and that's the PlayStation. So yes, more games going to PlayStation will mean more money for Xbox, and yes, 30% to Sony, but there's a 70% to Microsoft. Now, is that 70% all of that revenue from Forza Horizon 5, from Halo, from Fable, from Perfect Dark, from Elder Scrolls 6? Is all of that enough to keep the lights on when it comes to producing hardware? I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see. But it is, I can't find really a negative when you take a 4-year-old game and you say, let's put it somewhere else, and then it becomes the most pre-ordered game above brand new AAA games coming out in 2025. And then you look at the early access paid for this 4-year-old game, and that's leading the way. So ultimately, Sony has to be looking at some of their older games and thinking, man, we're not making any money off of these games. They're just languishing in our ecosystem. And yes, maybe to them, keeping those games in that ecosystem exclusive pushes hardware sales. Maybe it does. I don't know. It does seem like it. So I feel like Microsoft is caught between a rock and a hard place, and they created the rock and they created the hard place themselves. So it's their fault they're in that position, but there's nothing else for them to do. And the real question is, what kind of hardware are we going to get next generation? Tons of stories, tons of YouTubers, everything's costed out for the next Xbox, but that doesn't give me any information as to what actually they approved. Is it going to be this biggest technological leap ever? And does that mean power? Does that mean scalability? Does that mean access? What does that mean? So at the end of the day, if I had to bet, if I had to say to you, when they announce the next Xbox and they announce the next PlayStation 6 and Xbox Next, whatever it's called, I'm almost positive that the PlayStation 6 is going to be a much more traditional, powerful console. Probably have a stranglehold on third parties because of the success of PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 4 and PlayStation in general. And Xbox will probably be in the same position they're in now, albeit making a ton of additional revenue by putting their games everywhere. But ultimately, most people are still purchasing their video games. So Game Pass as a driver to pull those people away from PlayStation is just not happening in any meaningful way at all. And the only way to grow Game Pass is to sell hardware. And you're not selling hardware because console gamers aren't going in droves to PC, and they're certainly not sitting there with controllers tethered to their phone. You need to sell hardware, and they're not. Ultimately, this video is long, and the point of it is, I don't think that the next Xbox is going to be what people think it's going to be. I think it's going to be a very cost-effective answer to what Game Pass subscription service All In has done to the Xbox brand. In general, I could be wrong, as always. Let me know in the comment section below. Thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.